You're listening to Luke Squared Starting Over.
So on today's episode, we unpack Chris Kreider's controversial hit against Elias Pettersson.
Russel Westbrook's aggressive interaction with a Utah Jazz fan.
The Champions League quarterfinal predictions.
And breaking down the official March Madness bracket. Welcome to another edition of Luke Squared's Starting Lineup. Just before we get going, we want to give a big shout out to Christian Daya, our creative director.
So he designed the logo that you guys are seeing on our profile, and we're really proud of it. We think it looks pretty professional.
Yep, a little rebrand, so we really appreciate the hard work Christian's put into that, so thank you, buddy.
Yeah, let's dive right into it. On tap for you guys, there's lots happening. Like we said last week, it's the most exciting time to be a sports fan.
Very exciting Selection Sunday.
Exactly. Selection Sunday happened. The tournament is starting as we speak. Right now, we actually in the background have
We got Farley Dickinson
against Prairie View happening,
Yeah.
and this is one of the first four games happening right now in Dayton. So lots of stuff on the go. If we zone out, we're actually just paying more attention to the game than we are recording.
No, we're good. We're actually going to start with Chris Kreider's hit on Elias Pettersson. I know this hits home for Luke, being a Canucks fan, but if you caught the game last week, you would have seen that there was a pretty controversial hit by Chris Kreider. He came in to hit Pettersson, who is the Canucks rookie, who has actually just broken the rookie scoring record for the Canucks. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he passed Pavel Bure. He scored his 61st point Monday night, and it's an exciting time for Canucks fans. But last week, when the Canucks were playing the New York Rangers, essentially Pettersson was in his own zone along the boards behind the net.
Yeah. He
made a pass up along the boards, and Kreider came in, and Pettersson sidestepped him and kind of avoided the hit. But then what happened was Kreider ended up kind of spinning and flailing his arms.
Yeah, he definitely intentionally finished the hit despite getting sidestepped, and he swung his right elbow around into the nose and the face of Pettersson. So Kreider's ended up being fined $5,000, which is the max which is allowed for a fine by the CBA. What are your thoughts on the $5,000 fine, seeing as he was not suspended? He was ejected from the game and given a 5-minute elbowing major, but no suspension, but just a $5,000 fine.
Yeah, you know what bothers me the most is, let's break this down a little bit. So if we have two guys that are willing to go at it, willing to fight, and it's kind of like a consensual battle between the two guys, I think that's okay. Let the boys play. Let them play physical. Let them drop the gloves. It's entertaining for the fans. It boosts the team, boosts their energy. But when you have someone like this, a young player who is, frankly, 180 pounds soaking wet, he's not a very big guy.
No, small guy.
And you have someone like Chris Kreider coming in, someone who's definitely been in the league a while, and he can throw his body around. We need to be protecting these players who aren't opting into this physical game, and they're just trying to play hockey. And it's frustrating because Kreider was fined $5,000, but looking at his salary...
Yeah. No, when you break that down, he's making $4.5 million this year. So we're talking $5,000 of that. That's less than 10% of what he makes in one game.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So if we're talking about a way to enforce, dirty hits and head contact, him sacrificing 10% of one game salary, he didn't even lose a full game salary or 2 game salary, nothing. He literally lost less than 10% of his one salary. So
he's still making money by sitting in the dressing room.
No, he's making more money sitting in the dressing room than he is by or just by hitting him, right?
Exactly.
So what the CBA should be looking into is potentially heftier fines. Even we're looking into the NBA. Maybe somebody makes a post-game comment about one of the officials, a public slander of some sort. They're being fined anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000, depending on the comment. That's a little bit better, obviously $25,000, right? But still, that would only be 50%, nearly 50% of what Chris Kreider is making in one game. So I think, especially considering where a lot of these guys are being paid, these salaries, especially if they're not enforcing game suspensions, are pretty low.
Oh, exactly, and it's a shame too because Pettersson, if you watched him play, he really is one of the most impressive talents to watch. He's
Sure.
really exciting, and he's so quick on his feet. Even if he were to sidestep the hit and Kreider wasn't to finish it, flailing his arm around in sort of a spinorama, that would be on the highlight reel as sort of a sidestep deke around.
It's a cop-out for Chris Kreider, absolutely. He realized he got sidestepped and he just wanted to finish the hit. No place for that in the game at all. Do you think that there should be automatic suspension for intentional head contact?
Well, I know something that's kind of been in the talks around these injuries to superstars. The same thing was said when Sidney Crosby was out for an extended period of time number of years
Concussions,
ago.
Yep.
There was talk over should the player who committed the hit, should they spend as much time sidelined as the player is injured?
Yeah.
And I think that this, obviously there's a lot of gray area here. You could have a really good player make a good hit on another good player, and you could have that team sort of milk the injury to keep a player out.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough call, especially in this case. Pettersson didn't even have to leave the game.
But yeah, so Pettersson went to the dressing room for about 5 minutes, and then he was back on the bench, and that was it.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying. There definitely needs to be some sort of, especially in this present day, I know that the NHL is trying to ramp up their penalties for head contact and try and protect the players a little bit more, especially after all the studies came out about how concussions are lowering players' life expectancy and whatnot. Maybe this wasn't a cheap shot in the sense where he lifted his head and was hit mid-ice, but it was as much head contact as anything.
I think that the suspension needs to be somewhat proportional to the amount of impact that the injury has on the team that's being hit. So if that player is out for X amount of games, there needs to be a suspension that coincides with this impact on a team. A team like Vancouver, if this were to happen earlier in the year and Pettersson ended up missing 15, 20 games, there goes their season. Pettersson is the catalyst of their offense.
Absolutely.
And it's like this for any team. If you were to take out Alexander Ovechkin, well, there goes Washington's power play.
Absolutely.
He's the key of Washington's power play. And I think that there needs to be something that sort of tailors itself to the impact that it has on a specific
Whether
case.
A larger fine, because $5,000 is not much of an incentive.
That's
nothing. You know what? If I'm like a Sean Avery type player, right, and really love getting in, and speaking of New York Rangers, if I'm a Sean Avery type player and really love just getting under the skin of my opponents and don't really have much remorse for injuries that I'm, dishing out to other players, I'm fine with that. That's 10% of my salary. I am still making around $50,000 for that game. That's brutal.
Exactly, and I think it's the same as getting a parking ticket, and they say, okay, it's a toonie.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, that was worth it. Like,
sure.
There's no impact on these players who are making millions and millions of dollars each year to play, and they're making almost over $50,000, and Kreider is by no means one of your superstar names in the league.
No.
And this is pocket change for him.
Yeah.
And there needs to be something that's protecting our stars, protecting our players that don't want to play that physical game. Not to take anything away from the physical game. That's part of hockey.
Absolutely.
But you don't want to be not punishing the players who need to be punished for hindering the performance of these superstars that attract so many fans.
I'm a little bit more surprised that there wasn't actually a crazier reaction from Vancouver Canucks in terms of somebody coming in and dropping the gloves. From where I saw it, obviously there was some words spoken to Kreider after that, but not much really happened. He just went back, sat in the box, got the word that he was out, and he was gone. But you see when Connor McDavid gets leveled, people are dropping the gloves for him. So I'm surprised, honestly, that such a quality young star like Pettersson, that there wasn't more done. But no, obviously the CBA needs to look into heftier fines, and definitely the NHL needs to look into heftier suspensions, because you hate seeing that. It's 2019. The science is there. We know how brutal these head contact hits are. So something obviously needs to change. So you know what? You hate to see that in the game.
Exactly. So we really want to know as well, what do you guys think about this? So feel free to send us your feedback on this. Send this to our email, As always, the link will be in the description. And we want to know a chance to be featured on our show because we'd love to know your perspective and if there are any potential solutions you have to this problem and how the NHL and how the CBA could do a better job of enforcing conduct for such behavior.
Absolutely. And you know what? Riding that wave of news lines from the last couple of weeks, we did see Russel Westbrook get into a bit of an altercation with one of the fans at his game, which we actually have seen as a fairly often occurrence with Westbrook in the league. I know a couple of weeks ago he was in a bit of an interaction with a young kid who had tapped him or touched his arm during the game as well. So, but at this game against the Utah Jazz, OKC at the Utah Jazz, there was some words spoken, and Westbrook after the game essentially said that, you know what, he completely backed up what he said despite making physical threats to this man and his wife, and said he would say it all again. So what it all came down to was the report is from Westbrook's side is that this fan was being racist, but from the fan side it was that it was kind of like this big miscommunication between the two of them. On a very arbitrary level, how do you feel about professional athletes becoming or having the opportunity to have verbal discussions with fans during the game?
I think that professional athletes are in a spotlight, and they always are, and they're never going to get out of it. That's what they sign up for. When they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in ticket sales for each one of their games, people are paying good money. They want to watch them because they find something attractive about them, something appealing. So there needs to be a higher standard. You have such more attraction to your profession than anybody else. You don't see fans line up to see someone work a desk job.
No.
That's their profession, but you don't see that. So the hype that surrounds these players, with that comes this responsibility and a higher level of standard. And I think that, you're a role model to so many children. Think of young kids who see you behaving aggressively to people that they might see as innocent fans who just want to have a night out and watch their superstar play. Whether that's the honest case or not, that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But that it could be taken that way that they're just going to watch an athlete, and this could be the role model to so many players.
Yeah.
And based on these interactions that have a negative persona about them, it's ruining the image of professional athletes as a whole. Sure,
and I get that. We were also watching Shannon Sharpe earlier on in the week, and he discussed how, you know what, he would have said the exact same thing, and you know what, he would have hated to see what actually Shannon would have done to this fan after the game. And so, you know what, racism, that's a completely different discussion. I think I agree with you. Being like a former athlete myself, I get that. You know what, you hear things all the time during games, right?
Yeah.
Last year we'd have road trips to New York City, and we'd have all sorts of rowdy fans behind us. And so it's definitely a big thing to be able to be conscious of channeling your energy into where it really matters during the game. But then at the same time, when this barrier of racism is crossed, we see this a lot of the time in European football, European soccer, that kind of crosses the line. And you know what, it's tough to speak to that as, you know what, white males. We don't obviously get these interactions. So we can't really, it's a little bit biased, but no, I completely understand the anger that's coming from Russell Westbrook, and I think that his actions are definitely justified if the remarks that he alleged were as they were. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So if that actually was said, then I completely understand what he's saying. It's kind of like two different conversations at this point.
I think for sure, and I don't want to overshadow the way that Westbrook would have been feeling at all.
No.
And yes, that's justified. But there's something to be said about someone who is clearly on a higher level than an everyday fan who comes and attends a game. I think that they should be held accountable. And there are other ways to express that, and other ways to go about seeking out the correct response without making this huge ordeal about it.
Yeah.
Right?
And, I mean, I think a lot less controversy would have been surrounding Russell if he wasn't already kind of a spotlight in the league for interactions with fans. And you know what, especially Kevin Durant as well. Kevin Durant, obviously a lot of people looked at him as a snake when he got traded to the Warriors after their 73-9 season. So you know what? He hears it from a lot of opposing fans. And Kevin Durant always turns into the crowd, and you know what? He bickers something back and about how, you know what? He's a superstar player, and they shouldn't be talking to him like that. In terms of Kevin's side, I completely agree with what you said before. Kevin Durant shouldn't say anything to the fans during the game.
Mm-hmm.
You are a professional athlete. You are making so much money a year. You should, like, I just think it's a little bit ridiculous because, you know what, if you are at such an elite level, you should be able to just not realize that that's not important. No matter what they're kind of saying to you, they're just trying to get you off your game, right? So
I think by acknowledging the fans' comments in that sense from Kevin Durant's situation, that's letting the fans win.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what the fans want.
It shows them that you're getting a reaction and that they're going to keep going.
Think about the stories that someone could tell if they said they were at a fan and they said, Kevin Durant, you stink. You're not a good basketball player. And Kevin Durant turns back and acknowledges that.
That's weak. It's mental weakness because everybody knows Kevin Durant is one of the top 5, top 7 players in the league. Top 5, absolutely. He's an incredible shooter and he's an incredibly clutch player. Whether or not it was a good move to go to Warriors, he knows that he's insecure. Honestly, it comes down to a little bit of insecurity for Kevin Durant because he knows he's so good. He just needs to open up NBA.com and look at the stats.
Honestly,
he does not need to engage in a fan. I think that's ego-based, and it doesn't belong in the game. I think it's ridiculous. But obviously, Russell's was a completely different situation. So the Utah Jazz ended up banning this fan for life. I completely agree with that. You see sanctions all the time in European football where entire soccer supporter sections are banned for a couple matches for racial abuse. And I think that's completely justified. Racism has no spot in the game in sports, whether it's basketball, hockey, soccer, baseball. It doesn't matter. So I'm not going to condemn Russell Westbrook for what he did, but in terms of how he did deal with it, you know what? There are potential maybe, you know what, other options for how he could have handled that situation, right? But it's tough. We don't really know what he felt when these things were allegedly said.
Exactly, and it's something that it's something that we'll never experience firsthand, and 100% understand the emotion that's going through a player when they're in the zone.
Absolutely.
And,
we both felt that.
And there are some things that we've said to teammates, to coaches, to opponents that both of us regret.
Yeah.
And, it's something that I'm sure that Russell Westbrook, he's obviously not an idiot. He's one of the top players in the NBA.
Yeah.
He has to have a brain to make it that far. Even professional athletes have a good head on their shoulders to a certain extent. And, I really, it's something that we can't really draw conclusions on.
No, I don't think there's a definite conclusion. I'm not going to condemn his actions, and I have no way of feeling what he felt. But in terms of, apart from that, just fan interaction on a very arbitrary level, how he interacts with fans apart from this, not in a racially abusive way, and how Kevin Durant talks to fans, and how so many players on an elite level are still getting rattled by fans, I think it's a little bit absurd.
Mm-hmm. And I think there needs to be that recognition that I'm above them, and it's not wrong to think of yourself that way, because
Absolutely.
you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week.
Yeah.
When
Easily.
People would die to make that in a year, right?
Yeah.
So there is a standard.
That's completely aside from obviously what was said to Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, from everything. But there needs to be this understanding that you are on a different level than them. So that needs to be taken into account to an extent.
Yeah.
So as always, we'd love to hear what you have to think about it.
Especially these open-ended opinion pieces. We want to know what you have to say. You know what? Every point of view is definitely accepted. We'd love to, hear your comments and take them up in the next show. But those are kind of our thoughts about that. I think we are going to move on to what's going to be a very exciting couple of months in the Champions League.
Yeah, we had a great round of 16. We saw some upsets, some close contests.
Comebacks. Ajax over Real Madrid.
Yep.
Porto over Roma.
Honestly, and then we saw some matchups that we didn't know which way they'd go. We saw the Bayern Munich-Liverpool game. That game could have gone either way, but we saw Liverpool just dominate in the Allianz Arena, and they took care of business.
In the home of the Bundesliga frontrunners.
Over the German giants. They were just dethroned by Liverpool. And then we've got a good showdown between two Premier League teams in the quarterfinals. So let's dive right into it.
So how do you feel about the Manchester City Tottenham Hotspur tie in this quarterfinal?
It's interesting because it's very rare that you have teams play against each other more than 2, maybe 3 times in a season. And Manchester City and Tottenham, they're very familiar with themselves. They've got 2 great managers in Pep Guardiola and
Maurice Pochettino.
Exactly.
Very good tacticians. 2 of the best in the Premier League, actually. So this is going to be a very drawn-up tie, if you will. There's going to be a lot of tactics. It's going to come down to kind of who has the weaknesses and who's able to, drop a game plan to dissect the opponent's weaknesses. They've seen each other in the Premier League several times already this year. So how this is going to end up is going to be very interesting. Obviously, Manchester City at the top of the Premier League right now, trying to finish that off. And you know what? They have a great shot at bringing home the Champions League as well.
I like what I like most about the Spurs. Yes, they aren't as experienced at this stage, but focusing in on the image of their team, Harry Kane. He's very consistent and he plays at a high level consistently.
We saw that against Dortmund.
Exactly. And
Dortmund was hoping for a second leg comeback, and Harry Kane early with a beautiful finish. He's just the type of player where if you have a lapse in the defense, he will make you pay for it. He's a finisher.
Yeah, and he's not going to miss any opportunities that come his way. If you're giving him open space, if you're giving him a run to the goal, he'll take it. And he'll like Lucas said, he'll make you pay for it, right?
Yeah, and you know what? City also are a little bit deeper. They do have Fernandinho, David Silva, Bernardo Silva, who are having some of their best Premier League seasons in a long time. And Sterling is as good as we've seen him in a long time. Bleacher Report is pretty much every week is raving on about how strong Raheem Sterling has been. If he gets the chance for Manchester City, he's going to bury them. It's going to be a great tie. You know what? Dele Alli and Christian Eriksen for the Spurs obviously are going to have to try and keep that central core for Manchester City at bay. But I don't know if we can see Spurs moving forward at this stage.
Well, looking at Pep, right now he's the only coach left in the Champions League who has won the Champions League, and he's, like Lucas said, he's a master tactician. And even when he was back in Bayern, I remember watching him, being a fan. And there were times that Bayern would be struggling, they wouldn't be in form, and he would hand a piece of paper to one of his players, and his player would convey whatever message that he delivered. That player would convey it over to the rest of the team, and then you'd see some magic happen. So he's a really good example of a manager who has in-game impact on his squad.
Absolutely. Spurs have been a quality side for several years. They don't have a lot of experience at this stage. They'll definitely be a threat. They've been good. They've been top 4 for the majority of the season in Premier League as well. But I just can't see them getting by this very strong, very deep Manchester City side, who is pretty hungry for a chance at the semifinals.
For sure. Moving on to another Premier League team who is in the hunt, we got Liverpool and Porto playing. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Porto is definitely the team that everybody wanted to draw for the quarterfinals. And you know what? Liverpool gets them after absolutely manhandling the German superpower Bayern Munich in the round of 16. If I am Jurgen Klopp, the gaffer for Liverpool, I'm happy with this tie. You know what? It could be the weakest team apart from Ajax in this quarterfinal matchup. But you can't overlook any team in this round. Porto did overcome AS Roma in a comeback last week. So it's not like, you know what, this Portuguese team is going to be a pushover at all. But in terms of, you know what, head-to-head, Liverpool took Porto 5-0 last season on the way to the final against Real Madrid. So I don't know. I mean, it's tough to side with Porto, but it'll definitely be a good tie for sure.
I think, yes, it will be a good game, but I can't see Liverpool losing this one.
No.
2 legs, the best team typically comes out on top. And Liverpool is playing very well.
No, they definitely want redemption especially with Real Madrid being eliminated from the tournament by Ajax last week, and that was the team who had beaten Liverpool in the final last year. They're definitely hungry for something. They're fighting for their life in the Premier League title race as well. Sadio Mane has been incredible, as well as Virgil van Dijk. The backline for Liverpool has been nothing short of spectacular. I don't know if Porto can answer this, but you know what? It's going to be a hell of a matchup anyways.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to this team that may seem the underdog right now, let's talk about Ajax and Juventus.
Absolutely. This game's a rematch of the 1996 final. Juventus comes into this after a huge comeback versus Atletico Madrid with Ronaldo notching a hat-trick. Once again, just displaying his greatness on the European and the world level. But you know what? Ajax is also coming in very confidently into this game after thumping Real Madrid 4-1 at the Bernabeu in Madrid. So you know what? That's a very young squad that absolutely tore Real to shreds, and actually ultimately led to the firing of Santiago Solari, who's going to be replaced by Zidane once again. So you know what? Ajax is a great team with a lot of young stars who are going to leave this summer, as we mentioned last week. You know, Frankie de Jong and Delight, obviously. But you know what? With this Juve team, as we've seen, they've got a lot of star power in Ronaldo and Dybala, and they also have, you know what, an incredible backline as well with Bonucci and Chiellini.
Yeah, I really like what Juventus has to offer right now, showing that they weren't discouraged to the point of elimination after losing 2-0 in the first leg to Atletico Madrid. And, you know, Ronaldo continues to impress.
Yeah.
Yes, there was some controversy over whether that penalty was a deserved penalty or not.
It's VAR for you, though, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're in the universe of video assistant referee.
And cameras are making decisions.
For sure.
But it's good that moving forward, it's good to see that Juventus has a chip on their shoulder and bringing in one of the best players in the world. They aren't sitting back. They recognize they got into a hole, but they are able to overcome it using this superstar to their advantage.
Ajax have various experienced defenders, obviously like Daley Blind and Tadic, but I think Juve will have learned too much from Real's mistakes in the second leg against Ajax last week. And once again, I think it's tough to take this young squad all the way to the semifinals. But you know what? Ajax has had a hell of a run. I think, once again, I'm going to take Juve there.
I think Juve for sure. I think Ajax's potential only hope will be cutting down Ronaldo's touches in the box in the round of 16 matchup. Ronaldo, when he scored his hat-trick, had less than 10 touches in the 18-yard box. So it shows his efficiency. So if you're able to isolate him before
2 headers and a penalty kick,
before he even gets the ball, then that shows that you're able to mark him down, and then it'll eliminate some of the potential for him to score.
I don't think Ajax will be able to handle him and Dybala. I think it's too strong of a team. Very solid on defense and enough star power. I don't think I can see Juve going to the finals this year. I think they have a good team, but obviously, you know what? They aren't as complete as some of these other teams. Speaking of which, maybe the tie of the entire quarterfinals: Manchester United versus FC Barcelona. Luke, what do you think?
I think that this is definitely the headlining matchup of the quarterfinals for the Champions League. You look at Manchester United playing very well, and Barcelona, obviously. Whenever you have the king, Leo Messi, on the pitch, like we said last episode, magic's going to happen. He is so electric with the ball, and everything runs through him, and rightfully so. He's the best right now in the Champions League.
Yes, absolutely. I think since Ole has taken over as the gaffer for Manchester United from Jose Mourinho, he's done an incredible job. Paul Pogba has come back to form. You know what? Rashford and Martial also look very, very strong, very scary. But you know what? When you've got King Leo and you have Luis Suarez, you've got Philippe Coutinho as well. I just can't see Barcelona slowing down. They are completely in control of La Liga. You know what? They looked like absolutely heavy favorites in the Copa del Rey last couple rounds as well. So you know what? The last time these two teams met was in the knockout stages of 2007-2008, where Manchester United ended up winning the third European crown. Barcelona's beaten them in 2 finals since. And you know what? I just can't see this Manchester United team, who has turned around their season, rightfully so, getting by such a deep and experienced squad at this stage. And King Leo has been at his absolute best, especially in the second leg against Lyon, 2 goals and 2 assists. I'm taking Barcelona, absolutely.
I think it's really difficult to really succeed and do well on the European stage without having a consistent season right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And Barcelona, I think it's pretty safe to say their season has been fairly consistent right from match day 1 in La Liga. And Manchester United, like you said, they've been having to turn their season around. So yes, they may be on the uphill, but I think the consistency of Barcelona will outweigh the uphill climb.
Our old high school soccer coach, Mr. Strukas, is not going to like to hear that, but I can't see Manchester United. I think they are, you know what, this is going to be a great matchup, but FC Barcelona's got a little bit too much flair for them.
Yeah, sorry, Struk. All
right, we're going to have to move on because this is the headline of the show, obviously. Obviously, the tournament is starting right now. We're watching it right now, Farley Dickinson and Prairie View. Hell of a game, but March Madness, we have an incredible tournament coming up. And so we're going to get kind of right into it, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Luke and I think is going to happen in each region, and then we're also going to analyze some potential upsets because it wouldn't be March Madness without some bracket breakers, if you will, right?
So, Lucas, what are you thinking of the East region right now? Break it down for us.
I really like Duke to come out of the East, and who wouldn't? I mean, you know what? They are a young squad, and you don't see these young squads with a lot of lottery picks going all the way a lot of the time, but you know what? Zion Williamson has just been an absolute joke, if you will. We were watching the ACC final, and you know what? He put the team on his back and even scored the game-winning point with 35 seconds to go. So, you know what? I really like Duke, obviously. In terms of Michigan State, they've been solid all season. They beat the Michigan Wolverines twice. And you know what? Louisville could potentially cause problems for Michigan State in the next round as well. But in terms of the Final Four in Minneapolis, I've got to say it would be surprising not to see Duke there. I think Duke is pretty happy with what they're seeing. Yale could cause problems for LSU, but I don't think any of these teams really have the legs or the firepower to get all the way to the Final Four apart from Duke.
Yeah, exactly. Duke definitely a favorite coming out of the East. Moving over to the South, we've got the 1 seed Virginia, the 2 seed Tennessee. Those are the two notable teams in the field, in my opinion. And I think that I can see Tennessee coming out of that region. Virginia, yes, they are one of the best. They've only lost to 2 teams this season. They've lost to Duke twice, and they lost to Florida State, who eventually lost in the finals of the ACC tournament to Duke. However, looking at their history in the tournament with the group of guys that they have, they've never been a team to excel in the tournament.
No.
You constantly see them as a high seed, a 1, a 2, 3, 4, but you never really see them in that hunt in the Final Four. So I could really see them getting knocked off in the Elite Eight by Tennessee. Other notable games to look at in there, and we'll dive into it a little bit deeper in a bit, but St. Mary's is a very hot team coming off of
huge win.
A big win over Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference championship game.
Oregon's in there. Oregon's in that. They're one of the hottest teams in the country, absolutely.
And you look at a team like UC Irvine, they're playing some of the best basketball in the nation.
Best rim-protecting defense. They are going to cause a lot of problems for Kansas State.
Especially for an injured Kansas State right now.
No. You know what? I'd have to agree with you. I see Tennessee coming out there. I do see Virginia in that Elite Eight. But you know what? Seeing their history in the tournament, and you know what? Hats off to Tony Bennett, ACC Coach of the Year. But no, I can't see them getting to the Final Four. You can't have every 1 seed in the Final Four, and I just think that they've had a great season, but they're not a tournament team in my opinion.
Exactly. Moving down to the West, what do you think of the West, Lucas?
Well, obviously Gonzaga, and you know how we both feel about Gonzaga. A bit of a fraud, and I called that on the show last week, and they ended up losing to St. Mary's in the finals. So you know what, of the West Coast Conference. So you love to see them go down. But you know what, for them to come into Minneapolis, they will see a very strong Michigan side. Once again, Iggy with the Wolverines has been having an incredible season. They're hungry. They had a bit of a shaky middle of the season after they were getting a little bit excited. But you know what? They're going to look strong. Apart from that, I'd love to see the University of Buffalo have a nice little run, as that's pretty much as local as it gets for NCAA-bound teams. Marquette is in there against Murray State. John Morant, obviously probably a top 3 pick for the NBA draft. And Marquette has struggled, as we talked about last week as well. So, you know what? I do have Michigan coming out of there just because I know that Gonzaga, as indestructible as people like to paint them, they lost 66% of their ranked games during the season. Obviously, UNC and Tennessee, they only beat Duke. which was obviously an impressive victory. But you know what? They're going to have a hell of a fight against Michigan. But I've got Michigan coming out of the West.
I also think that we shouldn't overlook Syracuse. Jim Boeheim does a very good job when he has lower-seeded teams,
especially in the tournament,
of finding a way to make it to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8. I believe 2 of the last 3 years, he's had a team that hasn't had very high of a rank, but he's found a way to push them at least to the Sweet 16. Last year, Syracuse fell to Duke in the Sweet 16, but they were by no means one of the favorites to make it through there. Another notable team to take a look at is Texas Tech. They are a 3 seed.
The Red Raiders.
But no team, after losing their first game of their conference tournament, has won the national championship. No. So I can't see them going that far. They've been good. They were ranked 7 going into Champ Week.
Yeah.
But
they're going to face a very strong Michigan team, and I don't see them getting farther than that. No. But you know what? It'll be a great game. Once again, Gonzaga and Michigan, I think, in the Elite 8. But I have Michigan going to Minneapolis for the Final Four, joining, obviously, Duke and Tennessee. But what do you think, Luke, about the Midwest and Kansas City?
The Midwest is a strong bracket as well. Let's look at the top seed, North Carolina. They're there for a reason.
Go Heels.
They lose their semifinal.
Let's go Heels.
By 1 point to Duke. Like Lucas mentioned, Zion Williamson with a very freak play to put the Blue Devils up by 1. Pardon me. And I think that they will cruise their way into the Elite 8. And then looking at the bottom half of that bracket, Kentucky is playing very well. Tennessee beat them in the SEC semifinals. That was their third matchup of the year. So I think the Elite 8 really comes down to North Carolina and Kentucky playing each other. And earlier this year, Kentucky got the better of North Carolina. However, I think that North Carolina is playing too well. You have their young point guard, Kobe White, some of the best hair in the NCAA, and he's quick. It's
one of the fastest UNC point guards.
It's really deceiving watching him catch a ball and even in transition off of a make, they'll beat the other team down the floor.
Kentucky beat UNC earlier in the season before UNC kind of turned everything around. That was kind of part of a little bit of a skid there for UNC, but they've turned everything around since then. We've got some other good games in there as well.
I'm really liking Auburn. I think Auburn will be playing in the Sweet 16 against North Carolina. They beat very good opponents in the SEC tournament, beat Tennessee in the final, and I was surprised to see them as low as a 5 seed. I think that they have been performing better than Kansas of late.
Absolutely.
Kansas being a 4 seed.
Absolutely.
But I think that they should be one of the 5 seeds that survives the 5-12 matchup.
Absolutely. We've got other interesting games in there as well. You know what? Utah State and Washington, 8-9 game. Utah State's been very, very good all season in Washington. Disappointing performance in the Pac-12, especially their tournament. So, you know what? It'll be really interesting. And we do have a lot of upsets to talk about, some potential upsets.
Well, hang on a second. Let's talk about who's coming out of the Midwest.
Well, who do you have?
I think North Carolina will come out of the Midwest.
That's why I tried to skip it, because it's kind of a write-off.
It's basically it's tough though. You have to be a little bit hesitant because of the strength of the ACC, and there's a lot of talk about Virginia maybe.
No hesitation with UNC. You hate to put. You hate to put two. Fan. No, I'm not. You hate to see 2 1 seeds in the Final Four. But you know what? UNC has been very good all season, especially the second half. Listen, all biases aside, though, I've got UNC. You've got UNC in the Final Four,
right?
I
do. As much as I hate that team, but I have respect for the program. Roy Williams, he is one of the best coaches in the country, and UNC will find their way.
USA Today, Coach of the Year for NCAA.
No, he is very good.
Despite getting 3rd in ACC coach poll. So, you know what?
I think is there. And then just very early predictions. Who cuts the nets in Minneapolis?
Who cuts the nets in Minneapolis? Very early.
So we've got Michigan, Duke in one semifinal, and we've got Tennessee and North Carolina.
I see Michigan beating Duke because A, wow. I hate the Blue Devils.
Wow.
B, Iggy was talking a lot of garbage early on in the season. Razdeikis for Michigan, but you know what? I think Duke is too star powered to win the tournament. I think as good as they are and as scary as they are, it just doesn't work like that in March. So I've got Michigan coming out of the East-West side. And then obviously UNC Tennessee. I've got my Tar Heels going to the finals. And then I have Tar Heels winning the national championship over Michigan. That should probably happen.
You're nuts. You're nuts.
Okay, what do you have?
On the other hand, based on the comments that were made from the Michigan side towards Duke UNC, I think that'll fire up the Duke freshmen. And you have Zion Williamson playing his best. In his first game back from injury, he didn't miss a field goal. And he's been rolling ever since. He got ACC Player of the Year, ACC Rookie of the Year, and he was the MVP for the ACC tournament. And he's going to put the team on his very, very broad shoulders. And he's going to end up taking down this Michigan side. And then, as much as I don't want it, I would love to see a Duke UNC final. I think UNC is playing too well to lose to a bit of a streaky Tennessee side.
Yep.
And UNC has been playing very well.
Would a Duke UNC matchup ruin their rivalry?
Ruin it?
Yeah.
No, that would make it better, man.
Well, a lot of talk around or in the streets has been that a Duke UNC national championship game would kind of ruin the rivalry, because then, you know what, the winner would obviously go, oh, we have bragging rights. Doesn't matter how you do us against us next season. Rights. Well, let's just move on, because I don't think Duke's going to win the national championship. Not going to happen. Listen, this sounds ridiculous because we're both picking our team to win. We're going to move on. Okay, digging a little bit deeper into the bracket, obviously, we've got Murray State over Marquette. John Morant is leading the Racers, probable top 3 draft pick, as I said before. The Racers are top 25 in field goal shooting with 55%. They don't have much of a resume or schedule, but how do you feel about this Marquette team?
I think that Murray State is going to end up upsetting Marquette. Marquette just hasn't played well lately. They're not playing well, like we mentioned.
Awful game against Seton Hall in the tournament as well.
Yeah, they got eliminated earlier than they would have liked in the Big East tournament, and they just haven't been playing good basketball. They've lost the last 4 games of the regular season.
Unranked teams.
They lost 4 games to unranked teams.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to prove themselves in the tournament. They could have been as high as a 3, maybe even a 2 seed based on their finish to the regular season and the Big East tournament. So I have Murray State. John Morant will come in clutch.
Tear them to shreds.
And they will upset the number 5 Marquette.
Cincinnati and Iowa. What do you think?
So this is an interesting game. It's the 7-12 matchup. And right now...
7-10.
What did I say?
7-12.
7-12. No, 7-10 is correct. But no, this is a really interesting matchup. Let's talk a little bit about the teams themselves before we dive into a conclusion.
Cincinnati is 114th in the country for putting teams on the free throw line. Not very good. They are not very disciplined. And you know what? Iowa excels here. Their free throws account for 42% of their field goals. They're very good from the charity stripe, which is, you know what, hard to come by in college basketball. You look at Duke's freshmen, and as good as they are, they can't shoot the free throw very well. So Cincinnati, well, I'm just going to say it. Cincinnati struggles to defend, obviously, on spot-up shooters, which is also Iowa's game, where they are averaging 1.1 points per possession on spot-up attempts. But obviously, Iowa has lost 5 of their last 6.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough, especially an early exit in the Big Ten tournament. It's going to be tough for them to beat Cincinnati. Yes, the Big Ten is a more powerhouse conference than the AAC that Cincinnati, the Bearcats, play in. So I think Cincinnati will hold on in this one. There's potential for Iowa, the Hawkeyes, to come out on top. But I think the Bearcats will get the better of Iowa.
I would love to agree with you, but I think we've been agreeing on too much, so I'm going to go Hawkeyes. Just for the devil's advocate. I'm going Hawkeyes.
We haven't been agreeing on
anything. Yeah, we have. Hawkeyes are taking them down. They've lost 5 of their 6, but they're too good of a team. And Cincinnati is too undisciplined. Hawkeyes are moving through.
I can't wait for UNC to lose in the second round.
That's enough. Villanova and St. Mary's. That's going to be maybe the most exciting game for me, obviously in the South region of the first round.
I really like this matchup. I think both of you and I will definitely agree on this. I think SMC will come out on SMC.
Oh, St. Mary's College, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not.
It's SMU. It is.
No, it's Southern Methodist University is SMU.
I think you're out of control.
What?
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. No. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep rolling.
St. Mary's College.
Regardless of the point, thank you, Luke. I've got the Wildcats coming in.
What, you wrong?
No, I'm lying.
You're
Listen,
wrong.
Villanova obviously has a lot of experience at this stage, great coaching staff, but they won the Big East mostly due to Marquette's poor play in the second half of the season, especially near the end of the season. And you know what? SMU is coming.
SMC.
Ow! No, SMC is coming off of a huge win off of Gonzaga, and you know what? They won by 13 to a team that thought that they were indestructible. SMC is top 40 in the country in not committing turnovers, and they have the highest points per possession in transition in the country, which is 1.3. That's a very impressive stat.
Yeah, and you look at Villanova. 3 years ago, they win the national championship. The next year, they put out in the second round. Last year, they win the national championship. I think this year, they're going to be put out in the first round to SMC.
I'd love to see it. You know what? I'm not a big Villanova fan. Obviously, two guards shooting north of 40% for SMC. Jordan Ford, not Jordan Ford, Tanner Krebs and Malik Fitz, but Jordan Ford is an all WCC pick. He's going to also be a threat. So you know what? People that are overlooking that are a little bit crazy. I'm taking I'm taking St. Mary's, absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. I think that St. Mary's will edge them. And let's talk about one of our favorite teams.
Absolutely. One of mine and Luke's favorite teams, a great underdog, the UC Irvine Anteaters. Great team. They are going to have a great season. Kansas State, it could be a nightmare for them. Kansas State is only in the 8th percentile for shooting near the rim, and you know what? That makes up a third of their offense. So they're shooting around 55% near the rim and the key. That's not great.
And one of Kansas State's saving grace was senior forward Dean Wade, but currently he is on the injured reserve, and it's questionable whether he'll be healthy for this game against the Anteaters.
Yeah, and you know what? UC Irvine is also the best rim-protecting team in the country, holding opponents only 44% and 0.9 points per possession near the rim. And that's somewhere that Kansas already struggles. So, you know what? Kansas State, not much of a three-point shooting team either. So the fact that they essentially have a terrible matchup for, what UC Irvine is offering on defense, I don't know. Who do you have? Do you have UC Irvine, or do you think that
It's
Kansas
a
is going
tough
to take
thing
it
to
in the
call.
4-13 matchup?
Well, Kansas State, they've played very good games throughout the season in the Big 12, and they always have good matchups with Kansas, obviously a big rivalry. But I'm going to say a big shout out to our good friend Dan Miller, and he's a big Anteater fan.
He is. Dan Miller is a huge UC Irvine fan, so you know what? Who are you taking, though? Anteaters, or are you taking
I'm going to pick Eater Nation.
I'm going to take Kansas State, once again, just to disagree with you. No, I'm just kidding. I think that despite UC Irvine being an awful matchup, Kansas State's going to find a way. They have been consistent all season long, despite their poor shooting down low and UC Irvine's very good defense down low. I think they're going to find a way to get it done.
So interesting for sure. I think that you're wrong there again, though.
It is what it is, honestly, at this point. Also, if you're interested in the ESPN Tournament Challenge, I always run a bracket challenge. So if you look up LSM, S, so LSM's Challenge 2019, you can actually join my tournament. The password is GoHeels. If you're interested, you can also email the link below this video. And I will give you the link to the bracket.
You can just post the information in this description.
I will definitely do that, Luke. Thank you. But I have won 2 of the 3 years I've run it, so still waiting for a bit of a challenge. Luke usually does not do very well, so somebody, you got to try and dethrone me. But apart from that, I think that's all we have for today.
That's all we have. Go Blue Devils.
Go Heels, and don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next week.